What up, dog?
What up, dog?
What up, everybody? Welcome to the Dev Hangout for Wednesday, April 11th. I'm Will Hungerford, Organized Play Developer. With me is Will Pagani, Lead CID Developer.
What up,
Dog?
dog?
Thank you.
Doug. What up, Doug?
And what up, Doug? Our special guest behind the scenes, moderator, commentator, enforcer, judge. I don't know what to call you right now.
Judge, jury,
Just Doug.
Just Doug. Mr. Seacat is joining us from off camera and has a mic. So.
Yeah, I can talk into this mic, and I will.
I'm very proud of you today, Doug. Very proud of you.
I mean, because you are much better at words than we are now. By
Sometimes.
No, by a lot.
I like to put my feet in my mouth.
Yes, you do. So anyway, welcome. Let me go over the schedule in case you're not used to watching before. Every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, we do the weekly Rumble, where staff like to get together and we play games that you get to watch live. Yesterday was Company of Iron between Will Schick and Oscar Schoonover.
Quite an exciting game.
It was a very loud game, from my understanding.
Yes.
Every Wednesday is the Dev Hangout, where myself, Oz, Schick.
Is that now?
That's right now. That's where the
That's right
developers, we sit, we talk to you, we talk about what's going on typically in CID or new cool stuff that's coming out, let you know sort of the hottest news in the world of War Machine and Privateer Press development. And every Thursday, the best show that we put on, Get Your Paint On, also 10 a.m. Pacific, with Dallas Kemp and or sometimes special guest painters or even our train maker, Danny. I think it's been on there
The
before.
sultry tones.
Yes.
Of Decamp.
And that's where you
the
get to...
Pancake Master.
Wow. He paints and he models and he talks to you while he paints and models and answers your question. It's a really good show.
A lot about pancakes, which is great.
Yep. So, what are we talking about today? Today, we're talking about the Crucible Guard CIDs last week, as well as the midway point on the Journeyman Zero CID that's happening right now. If you're watching this later on YouTube, just to let you know, we do live stream this. You can watch us at twitch.tv/privateerpress. We also live stream other places. And so sometimes we're going to call out somebody's name, and we're going to say a question, and we're going to answer them. So if you're watching this on YouTube, we're not crazy. We're not just making things up. We are answering people live as it occurs.
We will look up and to the right. Our right, not your right. And there we will glean the information from the community for what they want to know.
For example, Siegfried right now says, in all caps, sup chat.
What up, chat?
So let's get right into the meat of things. Last week is CID for Crucible Guard.
Yep.
This is it. So do you want to go through the changes real fast and we'll talk about each one a little bit?
Well, there weren't a lot.
There weren't many.
We have this wonderful clipboard right here that contains all of our paperwork for it.
I'm going to take notes from people as they provide feedback in chat right now.
Yes. It's beautiful. It's an empty clipboard. It's fantastic. So the changes that happened this week were two of the heavy warjacks, the Suppressor and the Vindicator, as well as two of the light warjacks, the Liberator and the... I'm blanking on the name.
Vulcan?
That's not a light jack.
Oh, I thought you were saying the one you missed.
No.
You said
The two lights.
Liberator, Retaliator.
The Retaliator. Yeah. And then the Vulcan as well, all lost their immunity to fire and corrosion. And they picked up alchemical treatment, which is one less damage dice from those types of elements. Note, this does not, these are not elemental immunities. So things that interact with elemental immunities, like other Vulcans, for example, continuous effects, that kind of stuff, these don't affect those. So.
Yeah, and so part of this conversation is you see how these changes happen, which goes into what's going on with immunities. And the answer, and we'll get into this in a second, is that immunities are not changing. The changes that were proposed during CID are not taking place. Immunities will exist as you have known them forever.
There is one exception to that, which kind of got brought up in CID about
the Electroleap
stuff, because that is a change to the immunity rule, but it is not what we mean when we say that immunities are not changing.
Yes.
We were talking about, when we started that stuff in CID, we were talking about the original proposition that we had put in CID in the first 2 or 3 weeks of Crucible Guard CID.
Where it was one less.
So that is what will not be changing.
Yeah, where it was +4 armor at one point, all that stuff. Let's kind of talk for a second about why those immunities aren't changing, and then why the Crucible Jacks picked up this alchemical treatment, which is a pseudo immunity.
Yeah, so we had a pretty good amount of battle reports that showed things like Protectorate and Legion, and honestly other Crucible Guard and stuff, having very non-interactive games where they couldn't really use a lot of their range attacks or special rules or spells or things like that against opposing armies. So we don't like that. Yeah. We want you to be able to interact with your opposing army.
We like when you can play the game.
We would rather address this now for Crucible Guard and not worry about it later. then have to go back and change something like this because it turned out that it would be too strong.
Yeah. And in Crucible Guard, the problem was exacerbated, right? Because the entire battle group typically is going to be immune.
Yeah, I think
Whereas
there were
other factions,
two
you're
warjacks
not going to see that, right?
So we did leave it on the infantry, however, because as we saw with the changes that we proposed at the beginning of CID, fiddling around with immunities in infantry is a much bigger hurdle than it is for warjacks and warbeasts and stuff. So that's kind of why that changed that way. So.
Another change that occurred doing this. Let's see if we had any questions.
I also like to think that it was kind of expensive to put that full treatment on all those jacks, so they kind of took the cheaper option.
Yeah.
Sure. The cheaper, faster option, perhaps?
Yeah.
Well, resource-wise, Doug, since we have you on here, we're going to talk about lore every now and then.
Yeah, sure.
How do the Crucible Guards stack up in terms of resources in comparison to like one of the major nations? Like, are they more resource-heavy than, say, the Protectorate, but less than Khador? Like, where in terms of how much
I mean,
wealth they have available?
definitely don't have the kind of wealth that Signar or Khador are throwing around, but they also have a much smaller army, so you can kind of they can do a lot more with the troops they have.
Gotcha.
And so the idea is they kind of take the Signar approach of like not necessarily putting out huge numbers of dudes, but try to equip them properly. So so they get the full alchemical coating, whereas the jacks are now getting the sort of discount
a
coating.
light spritzing.
Yeah, light
with
spritzing
with a little bottle.
Sure.
Okay. Just a little.
Jesus.
Now light it on fire. Oh, okay. That's all right. It's not half bad.
The Dragon Pup asks in chat, do you think at a later date you will try to alter immunities again? Anything is possible, but at this point we're kind of leaving it be. We're not really looking to go back and change a whole bunch of rules and a whole bunch of older models to add things like alchemical treatment to other things. Because, I mean, as we've heard feedback before, when we change a whole bunch of legacy stuff at the same time, it can cause a lot of waves and stuff. So we don't want to do things like that.
That's a much nicer answer than no.
No.
Which is what I would have said.
Is also the answer.
But I like your answer. It was well thought out, and it gave reasons.
And I mean, at the same time, right, like on an infinite timeline, anything's possible, right? Like we could always come back in 5 years or something and work on these again. So I'm not going to say no completely, but no.
Nicholas in Facebook says, are there any Monster Apocalypse discussion today? No, today is going to be specifically about the Crucible Guard CID and the Journeyman Zero CID. We'll have discussions more about Monpoc in the future, but we're going to keep it to just the War Machine CIDs at the moment, okay?
I had a sweet Monpoc game yesterday.
Did you?
It was sweet.
Oh, okay. We can't talk about any of that.
I know.
Okay. You're just teasing people.
I'm a big tease.
The Vulcan lost arcing fire.
Yes, yeah. So we also had a question in chat. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, who it was. It was quite a ways back about how do we feel about McKay and where she's at currently.
Which ties into this.
Part of changing the arcing fire on the Vulcan is to allow a little more counterplay. So it doesn't necessarily just always get to shoot your caster in the face when you play against McKay. How do we feel about McKay? I think she's real good right now. Yeah. We're going to do a lot of internal testing here at the end of the week about this assassination stuff that was brought up by Brad Fogel. We'll see.
Yep. And part of what we're talking about, these Crucible Guard changes, and to reiterate, this is the last week of Crucible Guard CID. So if you see something that you feel is a major issue still with these last few minor tweaks that have occurred, now is your time to get your battle reports in.
Correct.
The CID closes Friday, if I'm not mistaken?
Correct, yes.
The
Friday, end of day.
Yeah, so you won't be able to post any more battle reports at the end of the 14th. So if you've got more battle reports, more thoughts.
I think it's 13th, but whatever.
Isn't today today's Wednesday.
Yeah. That's why we're on the Wednesday stream.
Today is Wednesday. On the 13th. Time is an illusion.
That is true.
It is true. Get your battle reports in. Like, this is your shot. Do it now. Please. Let's see if we have any other questions. We have a lore question real fast from Onino J.
He tunes into Dallas and I stream a lot.
It wants to know if the Crucible Guard are backed at all by the Highborn Covenant.
Not really directly, I'd say. Like the Highborn Covenant, is in support of the notion that the Crucible Guard might help liberate Lael if possible, but they kind of have their own agenda going on too. The Crucible Guard. Plus, they have their own finances. They have the support of the King of Ord, and so basically the Highborn Covenant is busy paying off resistance fighters and trying to buy them arms and gear. So I would say that they probably don't have the money to spare to toss any of the Crucible Guard's direction.
And this kind of ties into another question I'm gonna boil down from Nick Herding. I'm not gonna say his whole question, but basically, how does Ashlyn feel about the Crucible Guard?
I think that she's probably looking forward to their coming back into Lael and providing a little bit of support after there's been a lot of shenanigans going on in Lael with the Resistance has been not having a good few years, but with the return of the Princess and Signar coming back in to kind of help out a little bit. One of the issues with the Crucible Guard is that right now, the ones that are in control, some of them are pro-Lael, but some of them, are Signarin, some of them are Ordic. They're kind of their own thing. And even though there's sort of a strong core of old Crucible who came from Lael, they aren't necessarily all working for Lael. They're kind of doing it's like the liberation of Lael is sort of a secondary priority, whereas with Resistance, that's the priority. Yeah.
But I will say that playing Ashlyn with two units of Rocketmen in the Lael's Resistance theme force is super dope. It's super dope.
They are very fast.
Yeah, if you're a Merc player and you're like, Crucible Guard, that seems interesting. No, like, Crucible Guard, there's good stuff coming your way, especially in the Lael's Resistance theme force. It's super fun.
Yep.
And I will say, just to add to that a little bit, that I do think the Lael's Resistance is a lot happier to be working with the Crucible Guard than they were to work with the Protectorate.
Right. Well, I mean, Crucible Guard's like, yeah, we use chemistry or alchemical experimentation to create cool weaponry, and Protectorate's just like, hey, worshiping Minoth? And you're like, who? Oh, you're on fire.
Now you're on fire.
Whoops.
Oh no!
Sucks to be you. So that was the main Crucible Guard changes in this week's CID.
Yes.
There was one other small change to the Journeyman.
Yep. Kane lost hip shooting.
Yep.
Kane 0. We saw a lot of battle reports come in about how mobile Kane was, specifically in heavy metal as well, where he has reposition. And we really wanted his mobility to come from Spirit Door.
Yes.
Whereas hip shooting was very cool and very thematic and honestly a very powerful rule, we felt that it was a little bit too much.
Yeah.
So toning him down in that way just kind of makes a little more counterplay option happen. And yeah.
So let's talk about the juniors for a second.
Yeah.
So we're moving away from Crucible. Again, this Friday is your last chance to get your battle reports in. The juniors are going one more week after this.
Right, till the 20th.
Let's talk about kind of where we are with each of them and things we want to see from all of you.
Sure.
So since they came out, basically, Severius lost Oracular Vision, and he lost a point of Matt and Pow because Eye of Minoth affects himself.
Yes.
Then we're taking hip shooting off Kane for the mobility reason stated. Sorsha effectively unchanged, and Denegra effectively.
She swapped
Dark Seduction for Influence.
Which is a minor change, but I think it really helps her be a little bit more active. We know players are not a super big fan of that as our choice for how she is going to be active, but it is very thematic and fluffy, and we feel that Parasite is also very, very strong.
Yep. But I think let's give a quick run.
Yeah, let's run down each one.
So we'll go down each one individually, but let's just hit the overview. We're very happy with Denegra, Sorsha, and Severius. The main thing we're watching right now, the main thing we're looking to get is feedback on Snipe with King. We've got a lot of reports of the into deployment zone, top of one shooting, and we're looking to see what people can do with that.
When Hartford here says we have a lot of reports, we have a lot in theory and list building and stuff.
Yeah, that's
and
what
we have very few actual battle reports
of people doing.
And we do see a lot of comments about things like, well, of course, you can shoot in deployment zones. That's a problem. That is true. But what we need to do is see what the lists look like that it's in, how it's being abused, and then we can address on how to fix it.
Yes.
So that's why we want battle reports on these things. Like we're not really cool with things shooting in deployment zones in general. Doesn't necessarily mean the Kane's going to change, but we want to see how this interaction plays out and how this actually works, so that we can then figure out which string to pull, because there are a lot of strings here.
Yes.
So keep playing that. Show us your opposing army, show us how they deployed, show us what's going on in the game in things that happen here.
Yeah.
So,
and like you said, now you made my point better than I did. Play it, because we can do the math, we all can, but we want to see what you're doing. So now that we've said that, let's run down them. Denegra, how's the battle reports going so far on Denegra?
I think a lot of people are correct in their assessment that she casts a lot of parasites, which I would hope so, because that is a very powerful spell. The battle reports have been pretty interesting so far. I've seen some cool gunline ones coming out. I've seen a couple of the Asphyxious Slayer spam lists playing her now as well.
Yep.
So I think we're getting a decent amount here, and honestly, she seems to be doing just fine. There's some player feedback that she's not the most interesting character in the world, but sure. I think showing battle reports where she is not contributing to the game, and not because you choose to her not to contribute to the game, but because she actually doesn't contribute to the game. Little mini rant for just 1 second here.
Ooh. I'm gonna settle in.
When you are playtesting at all ever, never playtest with a goal in mind, because you will just make that goal happen, right? So like, never be like, I want to show that Denegar doesn't do anything, or whatever, or doesn't do a lot.
Let's refine that statement.
Sure.
Create when you make a War Machine list normally, you have a plan of what your list does, what it answers or what it asks. So playtest with that in mind. What are you doing with these new models? What does your list answer or ask? You can have that goal.
Yes.
But what you're saying is specifically, don't be like, I'm going to show that I can do this one thing and force your feedback to happen. We've seen battle reports where people have rewound the state of their game because it didn't go the way they wanted. And they've rewound it until that thing happened.
And then they use that as feedback, which is not good, because if you have to rewind 2 or 3 or 4 times to get the outcome that you want,
That doesn't help.
well, that's important, right?
Yeah.
That shows that it's not as consistent as you think it is, or it's not as given as you think it is.
But you're not proving the point you want to prove.
Correct. And then, and then also when supplying feedback, keep your feedback to your game for that battle report.
Let's talk about Sorsha
I love you guys.
momentarily. Sorsha, we're actually very happy overall with everything she's been doing in the battle reports. I mean, Boundless Charge is a very powerful spell to have on a junior, and it's doing what we thought it would, and so far we haven't seen any battle reports that have shown that it's terribly abusable. It opens up a lot of new casters in their gameplay. You know, I think probably the caster everyone freaked out about the most was Butcher 3 immediately, and we're fine with it so far.
Yeah, there haven't been any reports that's like Butcher 3 is wrecking everything. So if you are one of the people that thinks that she is not okay with Butcher 3, play some Butcher 3 games, play against some Butcher 3, see how it goes.
Yeah.
And once again, don't run your caster at Butcher 3 and be like, oh, I died. Like, no, actually play your game.
Oh, you mean like the 2 playtest games I had where I was playing Krios 1
Yeah.
against Butcher 3? Butcher 3 had a bad time.
Yeah.
Real bad time.
Unrelated.
Unrelated. Super bad time.
Yes.
Severius 0. He's amazing. We actually had, he's the one we had to tone down, right? Mainly because the Imenoff interaction with himself being like possibly one of the best combat solos in the game when he was Mat 7, Pop Strength 14 with his Imenoff. So now he's just the 613 you would see on this.
Which honestly still might be too much. But we're getting a lot of feedback on Severius, which is great.
Yeah.
And people seem to love him.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I'm excited for that guy.
And with Kane, we kind of talked about Kane already. So anything you want to add about him?
No, I mean, just keep playing these games, keep letting us know what's going on, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. A Sailor Twift asks, maybe a strange question, but will Mercenaries not have a junior? Just to reiterate, these 4 juniors are in celebration of the 15-year anniversary of War Machine.
Yes.
So there will not be faction parity on these 0 juniors. That doesn't mean you're not going to see more in the future, but this is specifically tied to the celebration of 15 years of War Machine. So
no Hernan John 0.
No Hernan John 0.
All right.
No,
He's got like a little workbench. He's building the.
Hernan John never became a caster. Wouldn't it
Yeah.
be
You
like
can still make a 0. You can make your 0.
Boom Howler 0.
non-junior 0 versions, like 0 versions of solos? I mean, hey, Doug came up with it. I mean,
I'm just saying. I'm just
Ship
picking
it.
things that were in original Prime.
For a lot of like 0 level journeymen, wouldn't that just be some of the rank and file in your units?
I mean, yes.
So they
I
already
think that's how
exist.
Striker started, right? He was a Stormblade, and then like a spark happened
Yeah.
mid-fight or something.
Boom.
So Striker would just be like a Stormblade guy.
If a Mercenary 0 caster ever comes around, and we're not saying it will, but if it ever did, I can imagine the brawl that's going to happen in the office of who it gets to be.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's going to be like Team Magnus, Team Gorton, and Team Ashland, and like we're just going to separate staff into camps.
Well, I'm just
And
saying
then
we,
you'll be over there completely naked in a diaper.
we
Yelling
do
about, like,
we do
Epsilon
have
Texas or
different
something.
Yes.
we do have different versions of non-casters though, like Eris. So I was just saying.
Eris 0?
I do think Hearn and John 0 should be given serious consideration.
I think Hearn and John 0 should just be Hearn 0.
Sure.
Like
He
John hasn't
found him
shown up yet.
Sure, yeah. He's just sad with his pistol.
Like, what does he do? He has a 2-point solo with a pistol. What rules does he have?
He
has a pistol.
He's looking for an Ogren friend.
We give him wagon and monkey bite. Call it a day. Ship it. So let's see what other questions we've got in chat right now. Wintermoot77 says, how do you arrive at the ones you chose? Were there any other choices you decided not to pick for the Zero? Well, again, they were the 15, the original 4 factions that War Machine first introduced everyone to, and that they were all from Prime. They were all iconic characters. As for how they got decided, Doug, do you have any insight on how those characters were chosen over, say, Krios Zero or things like that?
I'm not entirely sure. I think that in some cases it was a matter of which characters we thought might have a more interesting origin. We kind of got into that, a little bit in the Prime cast with the idea that each of these casters has a background that's kind of rich and that's interesting to look back on. That's the case probably with all of the casters from Prime, but I think there was just something about each of these that I do think Severius is one of the most interesting choices. Like, he's not the one I would have expected that we would necessarily pick, but I'm really glad we did because he's got the longest background. You could do like multiple pre-Severius.
Yeah, we could have done like because you said on Primecast the Journey or Severius Zero is effectively him in his 30s.
Or could even be 40s. Like and
Severius 1 is in his 80s.
Yeah, exactly.
So we could have done Severius 0 like in his 60s.
Multiple
then
times.
Severius -1,
0.2, 0.4.
Severius -2 when he's like a 15-year-old.
But like I said, I'm glad we did Severius because I think he's real interesting, being that he was maybe one of the first recognized warcasters that was with their army, and he was kind of there for the whole militarization of the Protectorate. So to me, I'm really glad we went that way. Not that Krios would have been bad, but
so Doug, piece of headcanon that I have is that Amon is actually a brought forward version of Severius when he's like 22 that Haley accidentally brought forward.
I see. That's interesting. And he decided to kind of do more of a physical regimen, like he got
right because regular his future self is already still
well
there.
well and he didn't like how feeble he got in his older age, and so he decided he was going to go back in time, work on his fitness routine.
Yep. Do you even lift, Severius?
Do you even lift?
So one more fluff question, and then we'll go back to what we were talking about. And this is again for Doug, because when you have Doug on the stream, you
got to get him.
You talk.
Sure.
If we had not gone with Prime casters, if we had opened it up to any of the casters in any of those 4 factions, would we have seen Karchev Zero before he became a Jack?
Well, yeah, we could have done that. We actually did one in one of the older no quarters. I think it was like one of the first no quarters, no quarter number 4. We did a version of. Or I'm sorry, are you talking about Ursk or are you talking about Karchev?
Karchev.
Yeah, we did a version of Karchev where he had legs and everything. He could walk around. He wasn't in a Jack yet.
It's not a little torso, just like being carried.
But like I always felt a little dissatisfied with that version we did. We kind of did sort of a. We sort of recycled certain spells, and I feel like we could have made him more unique. So
sure.
I could definitely see having some fun with that.
Are those issues of No Quarter available on the digital site?
Yeah, on digital you can pick it up.
I'm going to plug that right now, even though I didn't intend to.
Sure.
Everybody, you can go get all the old
Quarter.
issues of No Quarter on the website at store.privateerpress.com, and if you want to go read, you think it's issue 4?
I think it's issue 4. So and just as a fun little anecdote, that's one of the first sort of major articles that I wrote for No Quarter. So I had a lot of fun kind of going back in history and deciding like what Khadoran units and Signarin units even existed, and what Jacks existed back in the day. So
there you go, everybody. You can go get it on store.privateerpress.com, get the digital copies of the old magazines, and right now, limited edition at this very second, Doug will sign your digital copy with a kiss.
Yeah, sure. It's already done.
It comes pre-kissed.
Deal's over. Sorry, it only lasted for that.
And you missed it.
So anything else you want to add about CID?
It's sweet. It lets us get a lot of feedback, and that lets us make really informed decisions.
All right. Let's see if we have any other questions, and then we're going to start wrapping this up, everybody, and move on to next week. Do you want to talk anything about the changes to theme forces and those juniors?
Yeah, so the theme forces got to change. All theme forces will have this change, where a journeyman warcaster can take their bonded warjack with them. That was very unintuitive.
Yeah, that you couldn't
that's
take Blessing with any of the Severius Zeros, for example.
Correct. So that's something that we didn't really like about Iacos, and we didn't really think about doing it from the very beginning. But once we started getting all these questions in CID where people were messing up that rule and stuff, and they were not building proper lists and stuff, we felt that it's probably time to just clarify that, make it a much more intuitive and easier to understand rule and work. Because their bonds always worked. It was just that their inclusion in theme forces didn't work. So it was really clunky and weird, and we hope to fix that with
So
this.
we've had 2 asks for spoilers, and I'm going to go them in reverse order. First off, DM Lich asked for protected and mouth spoiler, throw us a bone. Well, how about we tell you when the Exemplar CID is going to start? The Exemplar CID is going to start on May 2nd. So we've got the rest of this week for Crucible Guard, next week for the Zeros, then a short break. Then on May 2nd, the Exemplar CID starts, and you're going to see all the cool stuff coming out of the Exemplar forces, as well as the changes to those models.
Which is basically the first break that we're going to have since January.
Yeah, we're going to take a second, guys. Just
I'm gonna
just
go,
a moment.
Take a bath.
Yes.
Go home.
Well,
for
and
the
you're
first
also
time.
going to Kingdom Con.
I am, yes.
Then
Protector.
the other spoiler request came
spoilers.
from Sabra. She said, "Hey, is there anything cool to spoil for Tharn?" There's a ton of cool things we could spoil for Tharn. I mean, a ton. But you said you were going to buy the Privateer Press beanie and post a photo, and I haven't seen it yet, so no.
Ooh, holding people to it.
Accountability. That's what we're about here. So before we lock this down, any other questions from the chat you see you want to answer?
Yeah. I did see one earlier that I wanted to talk about. I don't remember the name, but it was a Shisti or something like that, an SH name, that asked why were the Journeymen dropped into the last week of Crucible Guard CID, and do we think that that derailed the Crucible Guard CID? Was vaguely the question.
Sure.
They were dropped in. 1, we already had a community going, and that's great. 2, because of lead times and stuff like that, means that they had to go into CID at about that time.
Yeah.
And 3, do I think they derailed the Crucible Guard CID? Not really.
Yeah.
We were already pretty much on a wind down phase here. If you had been keeping track of the number of battle reports and things like that at home with your little CID scorekeeper, it looks a lot like this.
Don't show them that it's blank. You're ruining the illusion.
Yeah, Crucible Guard was approaching to a place where a lot of people felt it was good to go. And we felt it was good to go, honestly. So we gave an additional week. We put in our Journeymans. And honestly, we're still getting great feedback on Crucible Guard still. So I'm not too worried about it. We're getting a lot of people that are still very excited about the faction. So.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we were getting a ton of feedback on the juniors, which is fantastic.
Sarah Jane Shu says, "What is Iona's field marshal? Immobile."
Oh, and her feet makes everything into shifting stones, right?
No.
Oh, different caster. That's Bradigus too.
So we'll give one last little look. I don't see any other major things. There's one last question we'll give because we have Doug, and if you have Doug, you got to ask Laura questions. So Doug, I don't know if you can answer this one or not.
Yeah.
I'll give it to you. LuckGod84 on Twitch asks, "What's Alexia up to these days?"
That's a real good question. Alexia is sort of a problem because she's got that major artifact sword that kind of animates the undead everywhere she goes. So we haven't kind of used her very much in the plot. I have to imagine there's like a couple of bureaucrats in Signar and maybe in Kador just whose sole purpose is to like kind of lead Alexia into places that aren't going to cause problems for everybody. So I imagine she's off killing things, animating things, trying to get the people in her head out of her head.
Okay.
So yeah, like I think she's still working on trying to bring Mom back. It's all about bringing Mom back.
Sounds good. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining us. Don't forget, tomorrow is, of course, Get Your Paint On at 10 a.m. Pacific. Join Dallas as he'll be painting and hobbying on some new models, answering your questions about painting and hobbying, and just being an overall sweet dude to talk to. And we'll see you next week, of course, for Weekly Rumble on Tuesday, the next Dev Chat. We will be having Dev Chats even when the CID
Hangout.
break is happening, by the way. So we'll be here every week. And then, Get Your Paint On as normal on Thursdays.
Get your paint on.
Cool. I think we're good. Bye,
We're
everybody.
never good.
Well, we're
Don't
as good as we're
even-
going to get.
Don't even give me that.
Doug, thanks for being on.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah. So we'll see you all next time, everybody.
Never.
Bye.
Goodbye, friends.
Goodbye, friends.